Hi guys, it's Rob Litton here from drumsaword.com, and one question I get asked a hell of a lot of times, and quite rightly too because it's what I do for a living, is how do you learn songs for drums? And that could be a beginner song, it could be an advanced song. Basically just how do you take a song that you've listened to and transfer it to the drums? How do you take a famous drum part and work out what's being played and how you're going to sort of interpret it in your own playing? And so this is what this video is all about. I've got a free PDF that you can download where I've notated all the points I've made in this video. So you've got like a step-by-step sort of checklist to go through. And I'm going to hopefully explain to you best I can how I go about learning songs, not only to teach you guys and better transcribe it, but then also to perform it live with your band or just for fun in your bedroom. So obviously, like I said, I do this for a living. This is what I do over at drumsaword.com. You can currently watch over 300 full song lessons where I teach you a song from start to finish. You get the full PDF drum charts for each video lesson, each video breakdown. So if you want to check out my website, then you can find loads of songs over there. But for you guys who just wanted to teach yourselves, and hopefully this video is going to help you a lot. Okay, let's get on with the first section. First point I got here, song basics. First time listening to the song all the way through, that's obvious, right? This stuff is going to be pretty obvious. The first part here is dirt stuff. Later on we go into more detail. When you first listen to the song, don't worry too much about the details at this level. You're not listening to the drum beat, the drum fills. You're listening to general things. Just listen out for initially the meter, for example. Does it feel like a simple 4/4 rhythm, or are there some odd numbers in other sections? So start to sort of try to count along with it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Is that working? Maybe it's in 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And maybe if you can't, if it's neither of those two, it might be something else. It might be 5 or 7. So just be aware at this early stage what you're sort of getting yourself into with a song. Is there an odd time signature there, or is it a standard 4/4 kind of feel? Next thing is tempo, slow, medium or fast. Just get a rough idea of what sort of tempo we're talking about. Just the tempo changing parts. Some songs might get faster halfway through or slow down halfway through. So just start to be aware and listen out for stuff like that. Also the genre. Is it rock, blues, jazz, pop, reggae, etc.? This is going to help you later on to sort of have an idea, a feel for the parts. If you're going to change parts later in when you're learning it, then understanding what genre is going to help you to choose new parts. If the song can't be defined, don't worry about it. It's not important. It's just nice to have an idea in your head of what kind of song it is. Next thing is the feel, as I call it. Is it swung or is it straight? So if we've got some shuffle rhythms in there, some triplet rhythms going on in there, or is it all just straight stuff? That's probably for the more advanced drummers out there, but you can sort of have a feel of, is it sort of like a 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, or is it simply 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and... So get an idea roughly what sort of feel we're looking for at this early stage. And the next thing, the last thing here is drum layers. Are there percussion effects in the background or even electronic drum parts being played that you could potentially ignore, or the opposite, try to replicate? So if you're listening to the song and you're hearing something weird going on in the background that sounds like a drum part, then start to think about, or start to listen out for, do you think that's actually the drummer playing it, or was it a tambourine that was added over the top, or is it an electronic hi-hat that's being laid on top of the drum parts? And so when you're trying to transcribe and learn the drum part, you can decide whether you want to take those bits out or try to replicate them. Okay, let's go on to the next bit. So once you've got those basics down, we can then start to actually try and look at the structure of the song. The verses, the choruses, section to section. We're not looking at the finer details yet, but just getting an idea and certainly notating down the song structure. So you want to have multiple listens to the songs now, with pauses and rewinds as required. You don't have to listen to the whole song from start to finish. You can sort of start and stop sections to sort of hear or count different parts of the song. And what I recommend you use is, or what I recommend you do is download the song somehow, either if you purchased it or upload it to your computer, and use a piece of software like VLC Player, which is what I use, which allows you to not only rewind, pause, stop, etc., like any music player would be able to do, but also slow it down as well, which is incredibly useful. So you're able to slow down parts that you're finding really difficult to listen to. So VLC Player is my choice. It's a free piece of software you can download, but there's loads of others that also allow you to slow down music. Okay, so the first point is find a counting system that works for the whole song or each part, so you can define how long a bar or counted measure is going to be. So if you've got a melody that's going by like then there's multiple ways you could try and count that. You could feel it as 1, 2, 3, 4. That could be your pulse. 1, 2, 3, 4. Same song. It could be 1 and 2 and 3. It could be a slower pulse. It doesn't matter what you choose, it really doesn't, as long as you sort of try and stick with that pulse for the whole song if possible. That's going to help you to sort of count number of bars and give you an idea of when a new section is coming up. Some songs it might not be possible, some songs change in tempo, some songs change in time signatures, so you might have to come up with a different system. But most songs are going to allow you to come up with a pulse and count that pulse, or feel that pulse for the whole song. So make sure you choose one pulse, a counting system, and stick with it for the whole song. If you're not counting, then listen for repeating melodies and phrases and count those melodic parts instead. So if you're hearing that repeating melody might be your counting. One time would be and then 2 would be the second time, etc. So you might count sections by the repeating melodies of the verses and choruses. Up to you, whatever you choose, but just make sure you have a system in place for representing sections of the song, time sections of the song, length of time. Using the counting system you have chosen, notate how long each verse, chorus or bridge is. You might just list it as verse, verse, chorus, bridge, verse, etc. and not worry about the number of bars as long as the melody makes this obvious. So you might not necessarily need to count, for example, a lot of drummers, including myself when I'm notating a song, I'll actually notate the number of bars in the verse. It might be 8 bars or 16 bars. My counting system, 1, 2, 3, 4, 8 of those counts or 16 of those counts as a measure each. But you might find that you don't really need to do that. If you're learning a song really quickly, then and the melody's obvious, the song's structure's kind of obvious to you, then you might just go, there's a verse, then there's a chorus, or maybe there's 2 verses, the verse is repeated the second time, then there's a chorus, then there's a bridge or a middle 8, whatever you want to call it, and you might just list the structure of the song that way, rather than have to necessarily count out every bar. It's not always essential to be able to do that. Using the counting system you have chosen, I've just said that about the melody as well. You can use the melody to count the sections. Are there stops and starts or parts where you don't play? So listen out for and notate on your piece of notation, which we'll get onto in a second in the next section. Sections where you don't play, or more importantly, starts and stops, which is something that drummers are famous for missing. If you've got to section of the song where the whole band stops, including the drums, so make sure you notate on your chart, on a piece of notation, piece of paper, whatever you're using, that occurs at the end of the verse or the end of the chorus, so you don't forget those kind of things. Are there band stabs that you play with the rest of the band? So band stabs are usually like where you've got like a section of a song, where the whole song plays like these stabs, and the drummer goes to the crash cymbal or something. So make sure that you're able to write down all those sections, because you don't want to miss those kind of things. The most important parts, the starts and stops, and also the sections where you're expected to play something with the rest of the band, and if you don't, you've missed out a section. It's kind of important you don't miss out those sections. So notate those band stabs as well. Are there sections that change from heavy to light or the other way around? So you want to make sure that if you're going from a heavy section into a quiet section, you notate that. The worst thing you can do is crash into a quiet section, forget you're supposed to go quiet. So make sure you note those dynamic changes between loud and soft and loud as and when required. And when do the drums come in? How does the song end and how do the drums end it? Maybe the band slows down over the last few bars, or there is some drum solo ending. So on your notation, make sure you note where it comes in. Your drums might not come in for the first verse, they might come in on the second verse, so make sure you notate that kind of stuff. And then also, how does the song end? So a lot of songs end with the last few bars or last few counts where you slow down, dun, 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 dun. So make sure you notate that kind of stuff as well, so you know how the song ends. And if it's like a drum solo ending, then you might, if you're not worried about replicating the drum part exactly, then you can just notate something like drum solo ending, and then you can do your own sort of fill. But make sure you know, if you're playing it with your band and you come up with your own ending, how the band is going to end the song. So make sure you write on your notation 3 stabs, for example, at the end. Dun, dun, dun. That might be how you end the song. So make sure you notate that kind of stuff, how the drums start and how they end. Okay, let's go on to the next section. So before we go diving into the finer details, the beats and grooves, etc., I just want to give you a few bits of tips and advice that certainly help me when I'm transcribing something or learning a song. And the first thing is to understand what level of player are you? Are you a complete beginner or a new drummer? If so, then you're going to have to give yourself a bit of leeway, give yourself a bit of slack, because if you're learning a Rush song, for example, a really complicated Tool or Dream Theater song, or trying to learn it, then you're going to have to accept there are going to be parts in the song, as we'll go over later in this video, that you're going to have to simplify or change somehow, because you just can't be expected to play those parts. So just be aware of what level you're at, and don't have too high expectations. If you're trying to learn a song, be realistic. Don't put yourself under so much pressure where you've got to try and learn to play something that you just simply can't reach yet. It's much better that you play something solidly than play something complicated badly. Believe me, you're going to be a lot happier with your band. The next thing is what I mentioned earlier on, is notate using paper or notation software if possible. I use Sibelius. There's lots of other pieces of software out there. You find all the sheet music you can download from my website uses Sibelius, but like I said, there's loads of other ones out there, free ones as well. But if you don't want to use a bit of software, which I do highly recommend, by the way, because it makes it very easy to edit and change things around, then you could just use paper as a cheat sheet. If you can't use either of those, or you don't want to, and something I highly recommend you do anyway, is to record yourself playing the drum part. So if you're trying to learn a drum beat, then record yourself playing that drum beat. And what have I written here? It doesn't have to be a good quality camera. It can just be a camera phone, for example. It really doesn't have to. You're not going to be uploading this stuff. It's just for your own benefit. And when you're listening back, does the part you're replicating sound like the recording? So that's what you're listening for. You might be surprised to hear differences that can help you in working out what you're missing. So when you're listening back, you go, hang on a sec, there's something else that I'm missing there, that tom note or something, or that snare drum doesn't sound right. And when you're playing it, and you probably find, just as like me, when you're playing something, you're in the groove, you're not really thinking, you're not really able, because it's a skill, the advanced drummers out there, the great drummers are able to do, is about to listen to themselves, the whole performance while playing. But most drummers like myself, sometimes we find ourselves focusing in a little bit too much. And so having it recorded and listening back to it, you may be surprised to hear that sounds completely different to the actual recording. And then when you're listening back, that also might help you to work out, like I said, what you're missing and what you need to change. Hearing yourself back will tell you what parts you need to work on, and perhaps even which parts you need to simplify depending on your level of skill. Again, when you're in the zone, you may think what you're playing sounds really good, but then you listen back to it and you go, that sounds awful, or it was really awkward, or you were out of time. And so this will help you to determine whether you need to simplify drum parts or again change your parts to suit your playing. Next bit of advice is have a pair of sticks and a practice pad near the computer or device you are listening to on, so that you can quickly try out ideas as you work them out. So this is what I do. I have a little practice pad and some drumsticks next to my computer, where I'm using a VLC player to listen to the song. And I'll very quickly, if I'm working out a groove or a drum fill, I just use my feet on the floor. I might just play something, or if I want to really get an idea, I'll come into the drum room and turn on the drums and just play that one part and go, does that sound like the part of the song I'm trying to replicate? It's a really good idea just to have some sticks ready so you can just try out some ideas quickly. Next thing is to go online onto YouTube, for example, and look for as many videos of the original drummer performing the song live as possible. Also look for any isolated drum tracks. You can't always trust the music video either, as they are sometimes cut together in different orders by non-drumming video editors. So let's just break that down. So quickly, go online to YouTube and finding as many performances of the original drummer performing the song live. I say original drummer because when other drummers are brought into bands, they might change parts. If you're watching the original drummer, there's a very good chance they're playing the version of the drum parts that they played on the recording. And watching a drummer play it can really help you work out exactly what they're playing. This is something that I look for, and occasionally I'm very lucky with a complicated song. I'm going to find the perfect recording of the drummer playing it live. Based on my experience, I can tell that's what he's playing on the recording, and now I can see what toms he's using, etc., etc. It can be a really, really useful skill. And then also another thing is looking for the isolated drum tracks. If you just type in the song of the name of the song and then type in drum track or isolated drums, if you're very lucky, and there are a lot of them out there now, you'll find the isolated drum track. All the rest of the recording has been taken out. But be very careful with this, because as I found with many of them, sometimes they're just programmed drums that someone's just programmed the drums and just put them on, which means it isn't the original recording, and they have changed from the original recording. So you do have to be careful that what you're listening to is actually the original drummer. And if you look at the comments section, you can usually tell how many likes and dislikes the video has, will you also tell you whether it's genuine or not, I find. And then also you can use the music video, but be very careful about this, because they are sometimes edited and cut by non-drumming editors. And so you'll find that some songs, you'll see him hit a crash cymbal, but there's no crash cymbal on the song, giving you an idea that sometimes the music video isn't lined up with the actual drum performance. But that can give you some clues occasionally. So I think I'm just going to repeat here what I've said. You can use these videos to double check sections you have down or parts that you are stuck on. This can also give you ideas as to the stickings used by the drummer. So these videos, like I said, the music videos which I'm playing live will tell you, show you perhaps he's using a paradiddle there when he's playing that drum fill, or he's using doubles and you thought it was single strokes. So watching the drummer can be really useful for that kind of stuff. It also might show you stuff you didn't hear on the original recording. So you'll be watching him play something, and because it's low in the mix, you go, oh, I didn't realise he was playing on the floor tom there, because you couldn't hear it on the original recording. So again, watching the drummer, very, very useful. Some drummers change their performance live, and some aren't, and I've mentioned that second point. So yeah, also be aware that some drummers do change their parts live. I'm guilty of this with my old band, is you won't always copy the exact version that you recorded. Some drummers are really good like that, and they come up with a great drum part and they stick with it, but you do have to be aware that sometimes you're going to get drummers that change their parts live, so you can't always rely on it, unfortunately. The next point is you can also search for drums performing drum covers of the song. This can give you ideas as to what other players think is being played, but again, be careful, as the vast majority change the original parts to suit their own playing. So this is what I found with drum covers, unless you've got some real high level drummers out there who do this professionally, and even then they tend to overplay and make the parts more complicated because it's impressive to watch. We're on YouTube, remember, videos have to be short and snappy, otherwise people turn off. Hopefully you haven't turned off this video already. And so you're going to get drum covers, people playing drum covers where it's not exactly what the original drummer played. They're making it more exciting, they're throwing in stick tricks, etc, etc. But watching another drummer play the part, multiple drummers play the part. Don't just watch one drum cover, watch as many as you can if you're going to do this. Will help you get ideas as to what might be playing, and over several videos you might see a repeated idea that they all seem to play, and you can be pretty sure that that's probably what the original drummer's playing, but again, you can't be sure with that. If you are really stuck, then you can also search online for drum lessons and or drum notation tab for the song. This can be very helpful to see whether your interpretation matches up with other teachers and transcribers. Again, be very careful though, as you might not know the skill level of the teacher transcriber involved. Each teacher usually has their own interpretation of a song, and so lessons can vary quite a bit. At the end of the day, all you can do is go with your gut instincts as to which you think to be the most accurate. So obviously you can search for people like me online, drumsaword.com, where I do this for a living. I've been transcribing songs for 15, 20 years now. So you can be pretty sure that what I show you is pretty accurate, if not 100% accurate. But you can also look for other drum teachers as well, and look for free drum tab, but be careful with that drum tab stuff. A lot of that drum tab stuff is very, very inaccurate, as I found over time. And some drum teachers who upload sheet music can be very inaccurate as well. I mean, I probably made mistakes as well, if I'm honest, but obviously I'm trying not to, as I'm charging for these lessons. A lot of these people put this stuff up for free. It's just done in half an hour. They just throw it up, there it is, and people take it as gospel, as that's what's being played. Again, it can be used as a way of compiling information together to get a rough idea of what you think might be being played, but you can't necessarily rely on one transcription alone, unless it's drumsaword.com, to be 100% accurate. Okay, let's go on to the next section. So now we're going to start to dive into how to learn the specifics, the drum beats, the drum fills, etc., the actual parts of the song. So now we're raising it up a level. So the first thing I try and do when, for example, listening to drum beats, is the first section we're going to look at. is what is the right hand doing? So I've written here, is the drummer playing on the hi-hat, ride cymbal or floor tom, for example? Is the hi-hat being played open or loose? Is the drummer washing on the ride cymbal or near the bell? Is the drummer stepping on the hi-hat during ride cymbal sections? So working out what the hi-hat's doing, what the ride cymbal's doing, because that's usually what the drummer's playing his right hand on, left-handed if you're left-handed of course, or maybe the floor tom. And that'll give you an idea of what kind of repeating pattern is going to be laid. So is it, if your counting system is 1, 2, 3, 4, and the hi-hat's playing, then you're playing eighth notes 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and you could be writing or notating somehow in your own form of notation. That's for another video where I talk about perhaps how you can notate this stuff. You got your own system. You'll know that the right hand is playing on the hi-hat, it's closed or it's half open, you're playing eighth notes, you're playing quarter notes, you're playing a shuffle rhythm, you're playing a jazz ride cymbal pattern. All these things you need to note down. What is the right hand doing? That's the first thing to listen out for. It's certainly the first thing I listen out for. Because that's sort of your skeleton that you hang the rest of the notes from. Is the snare drum playing a steady bat beat? What is the repeating snare drum pattern? Is it every bar or every few bars? So next thing is to work out what the bat beat is. Usually it's just on snare drum on beats 2 and 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. But it might be a more complicated rhythm. If so, then make sure you understand, is it beat 2 and then the and a beat 3? Is there something complicated going or different going on with the snare drum? So work out what the bat beat's doing. And it might be over multiple bars. It might be over 4 bars, for example. So listen out for how the snare drum bat beat repeats. Don't worry necessarily about the ghost notes at this stage, but the main snare drum bat beats, what are they doing and what beats are they falling on? Speaking of which, are there any ghost notes? You might choose to ignore them. So again, depending on your level, and if you're trying to learn a song quickly, ghost notes are kind of this icing on the cake that a drummer can add to their drum parts if they want to make it more complicated and again, depending on their level. But if you're learning a song quickly, then you can leave out those ghost notes. And if you're a beginner drummer, then you can certainly leave out those ghost notes. Ghost notes are the little quiet notes you get on the snare drum in between the main snare drum bat beats. That kind of stuff is icing on the cake, and you can leave it out if it's too complicated or if you want to get through these charts quickly. What is the bass drum doing? Is it following the bass guitar? It might be playing an independent pattern. Try to learn the bass drum part by singing the melody it follows if possible. So usually you've got a bass drum that's following the bass guitar. Dum 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 dum. The bass drum's following the bass guitar there. But it might also be independent of the bass guitar. It might be doing its own rhythm. Dum 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 dum. By just keeping steady time like that on 1 and 3. So if you can try to work out what the bass drum is doing by hearing what it's copying. Is it copying the guitar, the bass guitar? Is it copying the combination of the both? And if you could have a melody, you can't do this with every song, but if you can sort of sing the melody, the bass drum and perhaps snare drum pattern in combination is playing, that's really going to help you to learn the parts. Is it a 1 bar groove or over multiple bars? The main drum groove might repeat over 2, 4 or even 8 bars. Each bar might be exactly the same except for the last bar of each repeating section, so take note of the structure and length of the groove. So it might just be a 1 bar groove, it might be a 2 bar groove. So it takes 2 bars, 2 counts, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 for the whole pattern to repeat. It might take 8 bars. You might have 7 bars of the same drum beat. Dum, da, dum, da, dum, da, dum, da, dum, da, dum, da. And then the last bar, dum, da, dum, ba, da, ba, ba, dum, da, dum, da, dum, da. And then it goes back to repeating it. So you might have a structure like that. So make sure you're aware of the length of the structure if there is one. It might just be every bar's the same, but it might be a 2 bar, 4 bar, 8 bar repeating structure. And then you might want to notate somewhere on your notes that the last bar of that section is something different. If you're finding the right hand part too much, then you can halve the number of notes. For example, you could move from 8th notes to quarter notes on the hi-hat if required. So at this level, you're working out what the drum beat is, but you can simplify also. If you realise this is going to be too much for you, then as a drummer you're able to do this a lot more than other musicians, because we can simplify our drum parts, make them more complicated, and still have it sound like the original part. You can't really change a melody and have it sound the same, but you can change a drum part and have it fit the music still. So if you've got like a double-handed hi-hat part, then you could change it just to quarter notes on the hi-hat. It's not going to sound the same, But if you can't play it, then you've got no choice, right? You've got to play something. So you can simplify the right hand part if it's just simply too fast for you. Same with the bass drum part. I think that's my next point. If the main groove features too many bass drum notes, then you could simplify, decide which part of the bass drum melody is the most important, and then remove some of the other notes. So with that example I gave a second ago, dum, da, dum, da, dum, da, dum, da, dum, da, dum, da, you could just simplify it to dum, da, dum, dum, da, dum, da, dum, dum, da. It won't feel the same, it won't sound the same, but it's still going to be in time with the band. And depending on the melody that the bass drum part was originally following, you can find the most important notes in that melody and hit the bass drum on those notes, but you don't have to do the da-dum-dum, those extra bass drum notes. They could just be dum-dum rather than da-dum-dum, if you know what I mean. So find ways to simplify the right hand, the bass drum part, the snare drum part, take notes out if needed to simplify parts by working out where the melody, what part of the melody the drum part was originally following, and then just choose the most important parts of that melody and copy those parts. Okay, let's go on to drum fills next. So the first thing to listen out for when you're deciding to notate or try to learn a specific drum fill for a song is, are there repeating fill ideas? So just like the drum grooves, you're listening for those main grooves that repeat, and you want to make sure you try and stick to those as close as possible. It's the same with drum fills, but you've got a bit more leeway. Drum fills are a little bit more, as I keep saying, icing on the cake. They're sort of another level, but certain songs have very specific drum fills that if you didn't play, you'd really miss them, or the listener would really miss them. So listen out for those repeating fills, the ones that get played more than once, or the iconic drum fills like in do 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 Phil Collins song, for example. You have to have that drum fill in. And what I've written here, if there are, then you want to replicate these as close as possible. If they are improvised or random sounding, then you might choose to not even worry about replicating them. Play your own fills instead. So at the other end of the spectrum, if the drum fills aren't repeated and they aren't iconic or essential to the song, and they're just too hard for you to play, or just too complicated to memorize, too many toms being used, then play your own drum fills instead. As like I said, a drummer, you have lots and lots of leeway when it comes to this kind of stuff, that you can change parts and still have it fit the music. So if you're struggling with a drum part, if it's not essential for the song, if you've decided using your own interpretation of the song that the drum fill isn't really important, then play your own fills, but try to keep them sort of close to what they sound like. For example, if they're going around the toms on the original recording, then go around the toms on the original recording with your version, but you can obviously change what toms you're playing. How many toms does the drummer use? So this is a common thing. If they use more toms than you do, then you will need to simplify the fills. Usually just take out some of the toms used. So this is a common problem if you're learning these more progressive songs, the more advanced drummers out there copying the more advanced songs. Then usually a drummer has lots and lots of toms, lots and lots of cymbals and crash effects. And so when you're learning the song part, you've got to decide what you're going to drop, because if you've only got 2 toms, for example, and the drum fill you're hearing is going down the drum, going down 4 or 5 or 6 toms, then you can't replicate. You've got nothing. You've got no other choice. You're going to have to simplify it. So simplest way really for this specific example is if you've got a 5-tom drum fill being played and you've only got 2 toms, then you're going to have to play half the notes on one tom and then the other following notes on the next tom. Perhaps you could use a bit of imagination and use the bass drum somehow to sort of add some more levels of dynamics to the drum fill. If you're more advanced, you could do a linear kind of drum fill where you're including the bass drum into the toms, so you've got another level there. But really there's no other choice. You're going to have to take toms out, and that's just something you're going to have to accept. Is the bass drum or hi-hat foot being played underneath the fills? You might choose to ignore these extra parts. If the bass drum is part of the drum fill, then you can replicate this using a low or floor tom instead. So sometimes when you've got a drum fill, the hi-hat is being stepped to keep in time, and then some rock drummers tend to play the bass drum underneath a drum fill. So listen out for that kind of stuff. You might think it's a tom being played, but it might be the bass drum just pounding underneath. And when you're replicating that, you can choose to leave out those kind of things. Sometimes the bass drum is more important to leave in, but the hi-hat foot tends to be kind of, you can leave out that kind of stuff usually. But if you're listening out for it, you might spot it. You might hear that there's a bass drum being played underneath there. And the fun thing is about the floor tom being used is that if you're playing a drum fill and there is bass drum being used in a complicated manner, then use your imagination and you could use a floor tom instead of the bass drum part. If you've got like a da-da-da, bu-bu-black, bu-bu-black, bu-bu-black kind of thing, then you could go da-da-da, da-da-da, da-da-da and use the floor tom instead of the bass drum. And then finally, dynamics and use of ghost notes. Are the fills being used to build up or build down in intensity or volume when moving from one section to another? Be aware of that. Is the drum fill being used to build up into a new section, in which case you want to replicate that somehow? And if not, is it being used to sort of quieten down into a new quieter section, in which case take note of that as well, so you know when you're replicating, playing onto the song, you know the dynamic level. Are you going up in volume, are you going down in volume? And then do you hear any ghost notes usually played on the snare drum within the drum fill? You might choose to skip over these and leave gaps instead. So if you're a more beginner drummer and you're hearing some sort of going on there, then you can choose to leave out that kind of stuff. And what I meant by leaving gaps, if you've got a drum fill that's, you could just play instead of all those extra notes I played. So you can choose to sort of take notes out, leave them in, depending on what you're hearing and depending on your own level. Okay, let's go into our last section, finalising, as I've called it. So throughout this whole process, and there was no specific order to what I've just talked about in this video, you can do these, you can be listening out for these things in different orders. But at some point, you're going to want to have a jam to the whole song, to play along to the whole song. And what I recommend you do is the first time you play along to the song, is put yourself under no pressure whatsoever. Expect to make loads of mistakes. As I've written here through, the first time through, do not worry about making mistakes. You're just going to get the feel of it to start off with. You are not performing, so don't think you are expecting to make mistakes. You can go back and practice specific parts later. So just have a play through the whole song with what you've got as notation, your cheat sheet, your notation, your chart, whatever you've chosen, your recordings in your memory, whatever you've chosen to use. Try to play the song from start to finish without stopping, without making any mistakes. I'll get onto more specifics about that in a second. Correct your notes if you notice mistakes in the song structure, etc. You do not need to be counting whilst playing. So even though you're probably counting when you're transcribing it, when you're trying to work out how many sections each, you don't have to be. If it's obvious, if the song structure is obvious, then don't be counting bars, even in your head. Be focusing on the music and using the melody to help you know which section you're going into. You don't have to be counting bars unless it's a really complicated song and that's just the way you like to do it. You can have a gut feel for the lengths of sections, as I said. If you know the song really well, then you might not even need to worry about the structure of the song at all. So, like I said, if it's a really obvious melody, you don't really have to worry about counting any of it. Make additional notes for parts that keep catching you out. Perhaps emphasise on your notes certain sections that you keep failing on. For example, a certain break in the song that you keep playing through. So as you're jamming along to the song for the second or third or fourth time, you might find that there's just certain parts that you just keep messing up on, and it's getting really annoying. You don't want to keep messing up on those sections. So, black marker pen or something, make sure it's nice and big on the chart. Watch out for this section. And just by doing that, you're going to be aware of it and you're probably not going to make any more mistakes with it. But if you ignore it, you don't take a note of it, then you're probably going to keep making that same mistake and it's going to get really frustrating for you. But mark it clearly somewhere, those parts that you keep making mistakes on, and that's a great way of perfecting them eventually. Practice how to recover from making mistakes. Don't stop if you forget a drum fill or go into a section late or early. Learning to recover from your mistakes and playing on is a very useful skill. You can always and should go back and practice specific parts in isolation after playing the whole song. So what I mean by that is when you're jamming along to the song for the first few times, and even after you've finalised your notation for the song, try to practice playing through your mistakes. If it's a part you keep getting wrong, then like I said, go back in isolation and practice those parts later on. But if it's just a different mistake every time, practice playing on. Because when you're playing with your band, live on stage, for example, or even along to the recording isn't going to stop, the rest of the band isn't going to stop. You're going to have to learn how to make a mistake and then keep going. So if you play through a section, go into a verse late or something, learn to keep going on, keep playing and not worry about it too much. Sort of focus on the next section. Don't keep thinking, I just made a terrible mistake there. Just focus on the next bit, And that's a really good way to keep the ball rolling. The worst thing you can do is stop. So that's a really useful skill. And if a mistake keeps happening in the same part, then that's a good idea, a good suggestion for you, a good place for you to stop perhaps, and then go back and just practice that little part. But if it's a different part every time, then practice, keep going. That's a really useful skill. Saying that though, feel free after a few jams to stop and repeat parts that keep catching you out, as I just said. If it's only a specific lick or beat you are messing up on, then isolate and practice just that specific part without the music at first. So we just mentioned that. If certain drum parts are beyond your playing, then change them to something simpler that you can play instead. Something sounding similar if possible, but don't keep playing something badly if you really can't get it. So I think I've already mentioned this as well, is that if you're really struggling with a drum part, then you're going to have to simplify it. Then you're going to have to change it to something else, something that sounds similar if possible, but if not, then you're going to have to do your own thing. And playing something well is way better than playing something complicated badly. That's a no-no. Play it well, simple. You won't go wrong. Worst thing that will happen people won't notice your drumming, which is a good thing. If you making mistakes and they're noticing your drumming, then they're going to remember you as a bad drummer. But if they're not noticing you because you're playing simple, which is fine, then all right, you might not be remembered as an amazing drummer, but you won't be remembered as a bad drummer, which is a good thing. As a drummer, it's much easier for us to get away with playing our own parts to a song. If the beats and fills are not iconic or essential to the song, or are not repeated at least once, then you can decide to change the parts to something easier instead. If you do decide to change the drum parts though, then keep them simple. Do not try to play completely different sounding licks or grooves, as this will really stand out and pull away from the original drumming performance. If you're really not sure what to play instead, then just keep the new lick or beat simple and straightforward, and you really won't go wrong. And that's what I just said basically. And then finally, try to record yourself playing the whole song from start to finish. When you're ready, when you think you've got the song down, as accurately as possible, try to record yourself playing the song from start to finish. Just the act of watching yourself back, and I've done this many times with my lessons, is a very effective way to learn parts and structures to a song. You might find that just after a few playbacks, you don't even need your original notes anymore. So once you've got that perfect take, and you might have to do it many, many times, but get a perfect recording of you playing that song, as close as you can, your version of it, or the exact version you've notated, if you're learning the song note, for example. Get a perfect take of it, and then you've got that tool. You can listen back to that video or that recording as many times as you like, and this will probably, as I said, be your way of memorising it. You might not even need your notes in the end. You can throw them away because you've then got it in your head. But don't, whatever you do, is listen to a version of the song that you made a mistake on multiple times, because that mistake will stick in your head. Okay, let's wrap up. So there you go. I hope you found that useful. I hope that I was able to concisely put all my thoughts together into one video. I didn't waffle on too much. If you want to download the free PDF, basically the script I used for this video, then you'll find a link beneath this video. You can use that as a cheat sheet. So next time you're learning a song or transcribing it, you can have it printed out in front of you. You can use it as sort of a reference to make sure you're getting all the parts and perhaps helping you to learn your next song. You can email me, rob@drumstheword.com, if you've got any questions about any of this. Come over to my Facebook page as well and say hi. That's also a great place to make any song suggestions you might have and to find loads of free stuff that I give away. My YouTube channel also has hundreds of free videos, as well as the preview videos for the full song lessons. Loads of free videos teaching you hundreds of famous beats, fills and solos. And then you might also want to visit my website, www.drumstheword.com. Which is what I really do these videos for, to promote the website. It's what I do for a living. I've been doing it for many, many years, using the stuff I talked about in this video. I've learnt, transcribed, and then taught for you guys through video lesson breakdowns over 300 full songs, 300 famous and popular songs, where I teach you a song from start to finish. Every single note, you get the fully transcribed sheet music as a PDF you download with each video lesson. And like I said, I've got over 300 famous and popular songs now, all kinds of genres and all kinds of stuff. There's loads and loads of lessons being added not every week, but over time, loads and loads of lessons will be added. Like I said, this is what I do for a living. If you sign up to become an online member for $97 currently, when this video was recorded, for a year subscription, you get instant online access to every single video lesson. I give you hundreds of freebies as a bonus and a thank you for signing up, teaching you hundreds of famous beats, fills and solos, lots of little videos, 3 huge ebooks teaching you even more famous beats, fills and solos that I've written over the years. And then over the year of your subscription, you also gain instant online access to all the new material that I upload for my members. So you've also got loads and loads of stuff to look forward to over the year of your subscription. And if you've got any suggestions for songs, I'm always happy to hear them. You can email me, rob@drumstheword.com, or go over to Facebook page or my free video on YouTube, free videos on YouTube, and type into suggestions and comment sections there. But again, any questions, rob@drumstheword.com. And until our next little drum lesson together, have fun, toodle pip, and happy drumming to you.